Reading 123 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll. Great Animal House, May 29, 1948. Notes on the meaning of this work. Work idea. This work is called psychotransformism. The first conscious shock is given at the place of reception of impressions falling on the mind, that is, the intellectual center. If the work does not intervene between the incoming impressions from life and the way they mechanically fall on the center, everything will remain as before. One remains a machine. A man can only begin to change when he changes his mechanical attitudes in the intellectual center that cause him to react as he does. All attitudes begin in this center. Later, they affect other centers. When impressions fall on fixed mental attitudes, the reaction will remain as before. That is, there will be no psychotransformism. Nothing will be transformed. This work is about thinking in a new way, that is, apart from fixed attitudes. Commentary. If you accept without demur, without challenge, your mental attitudes, fixed opinions, and prejudices, your mind will not be able to think for itself. If that is the case, you cannot change. To change, it is necessary to think in a new way. Most of one's thinking is simply the recurrent expression of fixed attitudes that infest the intellectual center, in a similar way to the infestation of the emotional center by typical recurrent negative emotions. So, no psychotransformism is possible. The mind, with its fixed attitudes, its rigid lies and blind spots, will cause every center to react to life, that is, to impressions, in exactly the same way as before. The mind must change first. I repeat once more that in the fragments of esoteric teaching contained in the Gospels, the Greek word metanoia was taught from the start, translated as repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It does not convey the inner sense. To repent is emotional. To think in a new way is intellectual. I again repeat, meta equals beyond, and vous equals mind. One has to get beyond the ordinary mind in order to change, and then the emotional center can awaken. And the ordinary mind we so poorly work with, this poor, unsatisfactory ghost of a mind that has no real ideas, furnishing it with rich, daily meaning, but nothing but a lot of blind attitudes, fixed opinions, and prejudices. I say this ordinary mind, as long as it reigns in us, will make any change of oneself, any change in knowledge and emotional being, quite impossible. So I do not understand why some still ask, why is it necessary for a man to change, for him to change attitudes? The answer is that attitudes block the mind, and so nothing can change. Yes, these terrible, proud, ingrained attitudes. Now, the greatest effort you can make is to understand what the work is about. Understanding is the most powerful thing a man, a woman, can make. And the work says we are born to understand. That is, it says we are born as self-developing organisms. A strange and extraordinary experiment on this tiny, unimportant planet, and one that may easily prove a failure, in which case we will be swept aside and another organism made. It is this self-development possible to us that psychotransformism is about. Now, I'm going to bore you again by saying that some of you do not yet understand how mental attitudes will make it impossible to develop. The mind must change first, before anything else in you can change in the direction of this mystery of self-development. So it is necessary for us to struggle to make some of these attitudes conscious to ourselves. Remember, a thing in you cannot change if it remains unconscious to you. So the work begins with self-observation. If you cannot observe a thing in yourself, you cannot change it. Always remember this. Only the light can cure you, and the light means the light of consciousness. So try to become aware of attitudes in yourself. A man, a woman, may think they love someone, but if their early acquired attitudes do not really accept this person, then, when a critical moment comes, it is obvious that this love merely floats on a far deeper antagonism. And yet this antagonism is nothing but a bit of flint in the mind with nothing behind it. But, like a bit of shrapnel in the brain, it is difficult to draw it out without some kind of general collapse. Now, to change a mental attitude is to make room for the work to change you. Stuffed full of attitudes, often of the most absurd kind, and, shall I add, out-of-date attitudes, you move about in life as a kind of stuffed idiot. Yes, in saying this, I am thinking of myself also. Look at a typical attitude entering the drawing room and shaking hands with a similar typical attitude. Then notice it in face of a contrary attitude. Yes, it is amusing to notice these things, but still more to notice them in yourself. The unconscious attitude, the unchallenged attitude, belong to our ignorance of ourselves, and only long, calm, non-negative, uncritical observation of ourselves, without any self-justifying, can make us conscious of our absurd, frozen attitudes. This leads to self-knowledge. There is a divine ignorance which is one form of innocence as in babies, but there is another innocence arising from wisdom which is utterly different. For example, if after many years you realize you cannot do, and therefore do not always blame others because you see they cannot do, but realize it is always your fault for being negative, then you become innocent through wisdom. And innocence means exactly becoming harmless as a baby, not through ignorance, but through knowledge, through understanding. Why do we blame another? Simply because we think this other person can do, that is, can be different. How about yourself? When we begin to work on ourselves, we realize that we ourselves cannot do. So why have a grievance against others, as every one of you has? People make internal accounts all day long against each other, and this makes a curious, unpleasant, thick mass round people for which Gurdjieff has a strange Eastern word that I cannot recall at the moment. People living together make this thick, dense atmosphere unless they work on themselves. Why? Because people fundamentally love themselves and no one else. Now I'm going later on to speak to you all from this angle of how the ideas in the work can transform you. I have mentioned one, merely, that it is my fault if I am negative, not the other person's. This reverses you. Actually, every idea of the work, if taken inwards, will transform you. That is, the mind can accept it. But no one's mind will accept the ideas of this work, even if heard for 60 years, unless they free the blocked mind so as to let living ideas take the place of dead attitudes. Now reflect. The ideas of this work are consciously designated to transform us. Take the brief example given above. The work idea given above is that if you are negative, it is always your fault and not the other person's. Does this transform you? Does this make you think in a new way? To think in a new way is to begin to transform yourself. Yes, but to realize you are to blame if you become negative and not the other person is to reverse yourself. You will understand later that all transformation of oneself has to do with a reversal in yourself. a seeing of everything the other way round. This is what transforms us.